All right. Well,
Yep.
maybe it's time for me to say, hi, I'm Nate. This is Rach, and this is PP time. I'm joined now by Rachel. She's actually my sister, um, who is also, I mean, would you say a lifelong Star Wars fan?
I think older youth to adulthood, yes. I think
Sure.
it took a while for me to fall in
Sure.
love with it, and
Once you
but
stop trying to
yes.
be cool.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So things may look different if you've watched any of our previous podcasts. Um, We're here to cover Ahsoka, which I'm really excited about.
Me too.
It's like I was a huge fan of Rebels, and we've got a great anecdote that I should make Rachel tell about her introduction to the Rebels series
Oh
at
my
some point.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
but before we get to that, I am not at home. My wife and I are visiting an elderly relative and spending some time out of state. But Rachel and I just wanted to jump in and start getting going on this new show, Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get going. Do you want to start, or
Yeah.
do you want to tell your anecdote?
I
Well, let
think
me
the
set this
anecdote is
up.
helpful. Let's just do this.
Let me
So,
let me set up real quick.
okay.
So Rebels. I assume anybody who's watching this, I'm going to assume that you know about Star Wars Rebels, that you know about the Clone Wars, that you know about the prequel movies, the original trilogy, and the final three movies. You need to know all that stuff. So this is your one and only spoiler warning. All right. Um, but Rebels takes place after the prequels, just before. I mean, it ends like pretty much right before Rogue One, the movie Rogue One,
Right.
and then A New Hope is right after that too. So those three things are pretty chronological. So Rebels is a lot about the birth of the rebellion. All right. So here we were. I mean, years ago
Well,
now, and
yeah.
Rachel,
I
Rachel
have to
came. Go
No.
ahead.
I have to tell this first. So,
Yep.
I was sitting with a friend of mine and we had just finished watching, I don't remember which Star Wars movie, but we had just finished watching one of them. Again, this was years ago. This was probably as the new ones were just coming out, so it was fresh. We were going through the whole series of what had already been made. And I was like, you know what? You know what would be cool? Like we were talking about if we were to do another Star Wars something show. This was maybe at the beginning of Mandalorian season 1. Like it was like, a few years ago. And it was like if we were to do another Star Wars, it was like what would it be about? And I was like, I feel like what we need. Now, mind you, I love Star Wars, but I've always just been a movies girl. So like I knew all the movies forwards and backwards, but I had not gotten into the shows at that point, the animated series, Clone Wars, Rebels, etc. But I had watched all the movies a lot. And I was like, what's missing in here is the development of the rebellion. And I came up with, like, wrote down notes after notes after notes of like, oh, it could be like this, and Senator Organa is doing this, and like all these things of like how the rebellion would come together. And I was so proud of myself. And I was like, who do I call? Like, how do I get this happening here? Where do I do the trademark to make sure this doesn't get stolen from me? I hadn't seen any animated stuff. Went to hang out with the family one weekend. And I'm like, guys, listen, I've got a fantastic idea for a new Star Wars thing, show, movie, whatever. And I was like, what if? And so I started developing this whole story of what I had created. Like it would be, first the rebellion is all in pieces and nobody knows what's going on. Everything's a little chaotic. And then suddenly like a couple groups come together. Anyway, I went through like, again, note after note after note with my family. And the whole time, both my brothers, Nate and our oldest brother, are just starting to smirk. And like even the kid, like my niece and nephews are kind of making faces. And I maybe got through, you maybe let me get through the whole thing. I don't really remember. And then it was like this very like condescending, Rachel, I take it you haven't watched any of Rebels. And I was like, no, I haven't, but I'm guessing that's exactly what it's about. And they're like, yeah, spot on.
It was a really good idea. It was the
you.
problem. They just already made it. It was
Yeah.
so, It
Yeah.
honestly, it was a little heartbreaking because I've been in that position before where I had a really good idea and I was like, oh my gosh, why has anybody ever done this? And then you find
Right.
out like, oh, somebody did it. And it's like,
Yeah.
completely free of influence of the show itself. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I had no idea. Although I think my story was pretty good. It wasn't quite the same as Rebels, and I saw it more as a movie, a one-off than a show. But anyway, that was
yeah.
my
And the
introduction.
truth
So then I went and watched
there are
Rebels
things
because
I
I
would
was like,
change.
yeah, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, this is a lot like what I thought it should be, So anyway,
Right.
yep.
Well, anyway, keep thinking of ideas and I'll keep trying to tell you
Thank you.
if they already exist.
And you can keep ruining them for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Ahsoka, episode 1. Do you want to get started?
Sure.
Cool.
Let's dive in.
All right, so we open.
Yes.
We open with this fairly new Republic ship. It's a kind that I don't think I've ever seen before. I think it was created for this series.
Yeah.
And we later found out that these are new ships being built with. I guess that was second episode stuff.
It was,
Full disclosure, we've seen both episodes. We're going to cover one now. We're going to cover 2 later.
Yeah.
But
so at this point, we're seeing a ship we don't recognize. That's where we're going to start.
We've never seen this before. And there's this mysterious shuttle approaching it. I also don't think that we've exactly seen this type of shuttle either. It reminded me of some shuttles we've seen in other series, but I don't think it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
It looked sort of Clone War era to me, but I found it very, very interesting. And there's this, like they reach out to the New Republic ship and they say that they're Jedi, which, to begin with raises some flags for me because I'm just trying to think like Din Djarin from the Mandalorian, like he didn't know what Jedi were, right?
Right. True.
And I don't know. They've always been a little too ambiguous for my taste at this era. I mean, now this is Luke Skywalker has blown up 2 Death Stars and stuff. So maybe word has gotten around, but that hasn't felt like universally understood across, all of these different contexts and everything.
Sure.
So I wish I had a better frame of reference for like when somebody says like, oh, they say they're Jedi. Like, should everybody know what that means?
Yeah.
Or should they not? But these guys know what that means and they're skeptical.
They know what it means, but I also feel like, I feel like they don't understand because they're like, oh, bring them aboard and we'll talk with them. Because I'm like, if you really knew what Jedi were, I mean, I guess they were thinking they might be good guys.
Well,
but I'm like,
guys.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, if it's a Jedi code, if it's an old code, you don't know the power of the Force. If you don't understand the power of the Force, like part of me feels like they weren't even comprehending the possibility these could be, whatever, the dark side as well, that it was, anyway, I thought that was kind of a situation where it felt like they didn't understand fully. It was like, we'll just bring them in and talk with them because I don't believe they're Jedi, but they thought they were bad guys. So I'm like, then they must not fully understand the Force because they could be, Sith or
so it's some
variation.
sort of classical overconfidence. Yeah.
Right.
It's like they from the start, they know like, well, somebody is pretending to be a Jedi, which they were right. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they didn't think they're pretending to be a Jedi, but they also have the powers of the Jedi. They just assumed it's like, well, it's somebody trying to take advantage, trying to slide their way in, seal, or, whatever. But whatever it is, it's shady, and they should have known better than to just be like, well, we'll just stop them.
Yeah. We'll have 6 guys standing there when they board.
Yeah. Well, did you notice, and I think, you couldn't help but notice, one of the, like, I don't know if it was 6 or however many of the New Republic soldiers that come walking toward them with the, whatever captain with them. One of them is Mon Calamari.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this sort of, I won't use the word agenda, but Disney has tried really hard now since the original trilogy, which the original trilogy did have, more aliens, non-humans mixed in with the rebellion. Then, the Empire is all people, all humans,
right?
In the original trilogy and in the newer stuff, and the rebellion, I think, more and more, not necessarily retconning, but really trying to nail that, in a little more. They're trying to throw aliens in like crazy. Like if you see The Force Awakens, and there's a scene where everybody's gathered around and they first hear about Starkiller Base, and it's like, it's J.J. Abrams. He's got his weird aliens, just all over the place.
It's like a sea of foreign creatures. Yeah,
right. A menagerie. Anyway, it's perfectly fine. I don't terribly mind that. So like, I don't mind the Mon Calamari guy here. But have you seen their hands? He had a blaster at his waist. Their hands are like flippers. There's no way that guy can use a blaster.
Yeah.
And I've seen there are episodes in the Clone Wars where the Mon Calamari. I talked about this in an episode where we were talking about the Mandalorian with Colin. But there's a scene in the Clone Wars where the Jedi go to help the Mon Calamari on their home planet, which I believe is just called Mon Cala. So it's those guys, and then the Quarren are also there. Do you remember the Quarren, Rach? They're the aliens.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's one in Jabba's palace, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, the first one we ever saw. But they're also aquatic creatures, and so like they're there and they're fighting the Mon Cala, and like there's this probably my most hated, like more than Jar Jar Binks in my mind, in terms of canon creatures that exist in Star Wars. I don't really have that big a beef with Jar Jar. A lot of people really hate.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a thing to me. But this guy was like a shark. He was a shark head on like a human body, basically.
Yeah. That was bizarre.
Oh my gosh,
it didn't fit. It felt
so
off. Yeah. Yep.
So in my continuing quest to act like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are like my buddies and just call them that. Dave, man, I know you were working on those episodes, and I love you, but I think that one might have been a miss.
That was a mistake.
All that is 100%. All that is to say. Here we have the Mon Calamari guy mixed in with the New Republic. Great idea.
Sure.
Having him with a blaster seems, again, like a little bit of a mistake. I can't imagine
doesn't seem like
coming out and being quick draw,
Yeah.
Seems like you'd need both hands somehow,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So again, I'm sure if I went back and watched it, probably they had things in their hands. If they had spear type weapons that shot lasers or what, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seemed a little weird. So then that very quickly turns into they confront the guys. Fairly. I guess I don't know. Maybe he's not huge. He looks kind of big. Bearded fellow, handsome, I might say. He sort of a gray white and gray white up here too.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one of these that's calling himself a Jedi, but he's wearing all black, which is a little out of character for Jedi, but Luke Skywalker did it, so
it's true. Yeah.
Who's to judge? And his Padawan, who looks like she's possessed by the devil a little bit.
Yeah. Crazy eyes.
And so they confront them, and they very quickly turn around and kill like everybody, and they make clear that they are not Jedi, but they have not quite red lightsabers. And this has been, I don't know, it's been a while now since this footage first got out there, so there may be more analysis from fellow fans and analysts that I haven't heard yet. But I don't think that they're Sith.
No.
And I don't know if they'll classify them as this, but what I was writing down was Dark Jedi, which is not a thing that's ever existed in the movies that I know of. Right. But Dark Jedi were a thing in some of the video games, and they were essentially they had fallen to the dark side. So they're Jedi. They aren't necessarily Sith, but they're not good guys anymore,
Right.
And more, what I pieced together is it seems like maybe they're just mercenaries,
Right. Well, and I think that's the way they're designated a couple of times, I think, in the first episode. But it continues, and there's a point I want to make for the second episode, so don't let me forget when we get to that. In relation to what you're saying, it being kind of a dark Jedi, that they're not necessarily for the dark side, but they're not really for the light either. They're for themselves. Like. Yeah. You said it's a mercenary. I mean, they're in it for money and success and power, and it doesn't have to be for any organization or people group. It's for whatever they want for themselves. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the nature of the light side is being selfless. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is the sort of, I mean, you see it in the Jedi lifestyle of denying themselves. You know, in the times of the prequels, even close personal relationships and love and that sort of thing. You know what I mean, denying
Yeah.
themselves these things in order to protect good throughout, you know, the galaxy and among the Republic and whatever. Which,
Right.
you know, it may have gone wrong for them in the end. You know, certainly turned Anakin Skywalker. But
Sure.
anyway, all that is to say, their motives are a little bit, if nothing else, a little bit shady, and they kill all these New Republic people.
Right.
Did I mention?
I mean,
the
they wipe
Blues
out
and
the
the
whole
Browns?
ship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the whole
I mean,
ship.
that's the impression. Well, I was thinking when, well, I'm jumping
You know
ahead
what?
here,
Maybe it
but
was.
when General Syndulla is kind of, is she talking to Ahsoka about it? At one point, she's talking about how, you know, like, so we had a problem with the prisoner. And it was like they said something about them taking their new ship, that it was like, we've lost the ship itself, I think. I think Hera was saying that in that situation.
We saw the ship adrift, right? So
Sure.
they brought Home One. Are you familiar with Home One, Rach? Here's
I don't know.
Here's some calling it super fan, you know, stuff. Super fan like lore here. It might be a little bit exaggerated. Home One was Admiral Akbar's command in Return of the Jedi. That's
Okay.
the big Mon Calamari cruiser that was there at the destruction of the Death Star. So that's pretty exciting.
Right.
I thought that was really cool. And
Yeah.
Dave Filoni, being an old school Star Wars fan, you know, and fan of the prequels and fan of excuse me, fan of George Lucas, you know, big fan of the lore and everything. He loves throwing that stuff in there. So I thought it was pretty cool. But Home One comes alongside this adrift, and like, you know, it's fun how they show it's space. So like, why is it that when they come up, it's askew?
Is it leaning?
It's just to help us understand, right?
Right.
It's like, you know, I mean, Star Trek is guilty of this kind of stuff too. That it's like ships meet like this, and it's like, oh no, they're never going to be able to get away. Well, it's like, well, they could go up, you know, they could go down, they could go this way or that. You know, people like to forget that it's 3-dimensional in space, but.
Right.
Anyway, they find the ship. It is adrift. I can't quite recall if everybody's dead, but certainly they got their prisoner out. And their prisoner, do you remember who it was?
Morgan.
Yeah, I can't remember her last name.
I never can remember her last name. She's in The Mandalorian, though, right?
She's an episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian, yeah. And she plays a I want to say governor, but it's not a governor. But she's in charge of this planet, and she's been oppressing people.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka is plaguing her. I think she says she's.
That's right.
Jedi, and that's when Din meets up with her, and she gets to know Grogu, and there's all these cute moments, and like I really loved that episode.
Yeah.
Of the Mandalorian season 2, but it wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't perfect. We're not talking about the Mandalorian. We'll move on.
Right. Is that really quickly? Is that the first time we've met her? I don't recall in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, as far as I know, that was no. You mean Ahsoka?
No.
Actually,
of Morgan.
Yes. It's the first time we'd seen Ahsoka in the Mandalorian. It's the first time we'd seen a live action Ahsoka. That was the episode. It's also the first time we'd seen Morgan, as far as I know.
Yeah,
and
that was what I was asking.
She was a little bit odd.
Yeah,
and we'll have to get more into that in the second episode because things happen that we're not familiar with yet. But she held her ground against Ahsoka, which, you know, I think is as close to a full-on Jedi as they have in the galaxy, other than Luke right now.
Yeah,
and she does pretty well, all things considered. Now she loses in the end, and she's taken as a prisoner,
captive,
and she's aboard this ship when, you know, these who I'm calling Dark Jedi arrive, right? So she's the target, and we found out she paid them to break her out at some point.
Right. Yeah.
So they came in, they kill a bunch of people, they grab her, and they leave. And what she says something about, like, well, you are good, or something like that. And he says, like, well, you know, like, we're well paid. Like, so that's why we're so good, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it skips to Ahsoka on a really interesting looking planet, looking for
Yeah.
something. It was this like, actually, this is one of the things I love about Star Wars, and I love it anytime they do this stuff to like increase the sort of lore and the background of everything. This planet that, as far as I know, we've never seen. Maybe it shows up in the comics or the books or something somewhere. That is like the danger of all of this that exists outside of the movies and the shows, is that there's just a lot that I don't know, and I don't feel like spending all the money and all the time reading every comic and every, I tend to think that I think like George Lucas used to think, which are, those are all interesting stories, but what is truly canon is the movies and the shows, right? That was George Lucas's thing. That's sort of what I think. Anyway, so she finds her way into this really cool, like, it looks like a temple. Like there were statues outside, like white stone statues and like columns and all kinds of things broken down. It looked like ancient Greece almost, all this white stone everywhere. She cuts a hole in the floor and she finds herself inside this whatever chamber. She does all this really Indiana Jones stuff, which again, I'm a nerd of many franchises. Indiana Jones is one of them. So she goes through and she's moving the stone discs and everything and all that. It was kind of fun. It was very Indiana Jones-ish.
Yeah.
Though to be honest, as I saw in a meme on TikTok, like, all of the puzzles that she faces are like, move this thing slightly,
turn it just slightly.
Make the two lines line up. It was not terribly difficult work.
Right.
But all that said, I'm not here to harass that. I thought that was fun. And she finds this little sphere, this little silvery sphere.
Yeah.
Did it remind you of anything?
Like
not
within the Star Wars, huh?
No.
Not Star Wars. I mean, it reminded me a little of a slightly big snitch from Harry Potter, actually.
That's interesting.
Like an oversized snitch. But what were you thinking?
Those are like, what is that? Like the size of a pool ball or something, aren't they?
Yeah. I think it's even smaller. I think it's more like a ping pong ball or something size. But anyway.
I was thinking of Treasure Planet. Do you remember Treasure Planet?
Oh, it absolutely. Yeah. I haven't seen it forever. I've
since seen it in, again, on TikTok, people comparing the two. And it's very much the same thing. So I want to keep this moving. We're, 20 minutes in already. But anyway, so she finds it. And as she goes to leave, she runs into these crazy, crazy droids that are like bounty hunters, I thought, whatever. We learn more over time. And I think was it 5 of them?
At least. Yeah, I think there was one that was like the leader and then 4 that were like encroaching on her, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, but, and I really, running a podcast like this, I got to be careful that I don't just complain all the time, because I really do love Star Wars. But as people used to like famously say, like, nobody hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. So there's this like, this like, I hate, and this is just the nature of the beast, that they have to keep creating people and things that can stand their ground against Jedi. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because Jedi, like, the lightsaber was incredible for its power of being impervious. I'm like, you couldn't block it, you couldn't whatever. So only if you had another lightsaber could you stand a chance against a Jedi or a Sith or whatever.
Right.
So pit those two groups specifically against each other. But in order to make things interesting, they have to have these robots, and like, General Grievous's guards had little like sticks that had little
electric
on the end.
Yeah.
That could block the lightsaber somewhat. Whatever.
Right.
So, anyway, I thought these droids were really cool, and I was even more excited later on when they told us what they were called. But we can get into that later on.
Yeah.
In the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she fights these guys. She does a pretty good job.
She does. I like her method. That's fun.
What's that?
I like her method. Like, you watch her backing up to the hole, and it's like, oh, she's going to jump in there. But I'm like, is she going to jump in there and have them, like, hopefully jump in there with her? Or, and then she just, like, drops them, which is fun. Yeah,
it's kind of like a whack-a-mole sort of thing almost. But the funny thing is, too, they didn't die when they fell in.
No, she just, like, delayed them. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, I'll just take these 2 at first, whatever. But I also, this is one of the things that you don't see in most Jedi, and I love that, Ahsoka is Dave Filoni's, my old buddy Dave. It's his, like, baby, right? That character he created from scratch, essentially.
Right.
Excuse me, for Clone Wars and now later all these other things,
Right.
But she's one of the few Jedi that we see wielding two lightsabers. Now she's not the
Right.
only one, and like Anakin did it once or twice. You see him in Episode 2 doing it once. So it's not that these other Jedi aren't like capable of it, but like it's cool to see because you'd use different tactics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like her holding, like I mean, she at least she used to. I don't know if she still does. She reverse holds one of them, so it's coming out here.
Yeah.
And like her little like blocking at different times. I think that was a really interesting combat, and not perfect, but like
right.
I like that they're sort of bridging the gap between original trilogy lightsaber fights, which were intense and insane and fast. Sorry, prequel trilogy fights, which were intense and insane and fast, and original trilogy fights, which were like, I mean, between Luke and Vader, sometimes they're pretty quick and they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
And at times I think they're very cool, cinematic and everything, but they're not the speed and the intensity that they had, between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I mean, look at the OG. I think the very first lightsaber battle we saw was between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, and that is like really, really intense.
People would say it hasn't aged well.
No,
which I think isn't quite fair.
Yeah,
but what the problem is, what they've done is, like all these things, they've taken something that made sense in its time, and then they said we want more of Star Wars, and so we have to find a reason to make the lightsaber battles more exciting again, because that happened 30 years ago, and so we need those things to be more exciting now. And now here, even later than that, they got to push it farther. But all that is to say, I think it was well done.
It was. Yeah.
I felt like in The Mandalorian, Ahsoka felt a little slow to me, and part of that is because she's not in animation anymore, but like she was quick, man. She was so fast.
Right.
And so it felt weird to me to see how slow she felt in Mandalorian.
In like person.
Yeah. But it was a cool fight.
Yeah.
And then she's saved by a character that, I don't know, did you recognize him?
No. Huyang or whatever. He from Rebels?
No, he is in the Clone Wars only. I don't think he ever shows up in Rebels.
Okay.
But he is... first of all, he's voiced by David Tennant, which Brie was excited about because she had watched some Doctor Who in the old days. But
that's interesting.
He's a droid, obviously, but he's a very odd looking droid, and he is perhaps the oldest being we know of in the whatever galaxy. Certainly within like
being from the Clone Wars, you mean,
or whatever. Well,
or like
he's
prior
way
to
older than that. Like I think he's older than Yoda, right? So I think
really
we may even talk about it. So he lived, as far as I know, full time on this ship. I don't remember the name of the ship, but it's in at least one, maybe two episodes of Clone Wars.
Okay,
and it's where the younglings go to build their first lightsaber.
Oh,
and he is like an expert.
Oh my gosh,
like
that's right.
In Jedi lore. You remember him?
Yep, I do now. Yep, I forgot that's who that was, or maybe I didn't realize it. That's so funny.
Yeah, no, it's a great throwback, and like. The thing is, this era is sort of like, first of all, I'm a sucker for the Jedi. I'm there. They sell a lot of like Darth Vader toys. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker, man. I didn't care. I want to be the good guy, the power of the light, and all that, right?
Yeah.
So, living in this era where the Jedi sort of don't exist, Yoda is dead at this point. Luke Skywalker is apparently rebuilding the Jedi Order as best he can, but now having seen the sequel trilogy, we know that all falls apart, and that sucks. We don't know what's going to happen with Ahsoka between now and then, because she's never mentioned in the sequel trilogy.
Right.
So, like, she may die at the end of the series, first of all.
True.
I don't know, but she might. We don't know what's going to happen to her.
Yeah.
But Huyang is from the old days, and he carries the torch for the Jedi in the light in a way, and, like, he has this... And we see it throughout just these first two episodes already. Yeah. This sort of like eternal optimism and like his vast knowledge of the Jedi and everything. And I don't know.
Well, and he's got it like
so
clearly
far,
ingrained.
He's one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. He's got it so ingrained in him. I mean, like when he talked about the younglings and everything, that it's just like, you realize that, you mentioned how old he is. I didn't think about I mean, I don't know if I knew how far back or didn't realize, but that character, that it's like, I mean, this is the world that he knows is Jedi Order, you know? And so, like, even when Ahsoka was like, it doesn't exist anymore, and he's like, well, but that's the way I think, kind of. You know, I mean, he didn't say that. Like, well, that's the reality. It doesn't matter if it doesn't exist.
He's a believer. Yeah. Yeah, he's like a, well, I mean, you can think whatever you want, but the Jedi Order is the right way, kind of. You know, like he's a...
Right.
He's whatever. He's a believer, an optimist, something like that. But
yeah,
I love that. Yeah, and so his presence there felt like he's the guy that, you know, I can count on to continue to be whatever, the cheerleader for the Jedi and that sort of thing. That this isn't, you know, during The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson's movie, which is no question my least favorite, even lower on my list than Episode 2, in which there was a conversation about sand. I don't love
well, it gets everywhere, Nate.
It's true. Of course. It gets everywhere. Anyway, I don't love that Luke is like, oh, it's time for the Jedi to end and everything. And like, you could kind of say that he kind of went back on that, and then, you know, in The Rise of Skywalker, JJ tried to bring it a little back more, like, well, I was wrong, you know, right? But I hate that, like, grumpy, like, the Jedi aren't good, the Jedi are just as bad. It's just stupid. It's just categorically untrue. They were the good guys.
Right.
Misled as they may have been during the Clone Wars, that sort of thing. So I love that character.
It's clear that Hu Yang is like a voice of reason for Ahsoka and sort of a support of like, hey, it's worth continuing this, you know, and I think that's good for Ahsoka to have. Clearly it's going to be a necessity for her throughout this journey. So
yeah, as close to a mentor as she has left anymore. You know, all of her masters and friends from the Jedi Order are gone.
Right.
So anyway, I thought it was interesting, the two of them traveling together, because Ahsoka has famously on a couple of occasions really made it clear that she's not a Jedi, that she walked away from the Order and that sort of thing, but she's hanging out with Hu Yang. And so I'd love to know how they came to be, you know, like partners in whatever is happening, you know. If he's just working with the New Republic now, or if the ship that he cruised around on still exists, you know, if he's got all those records and all that stuff still, I don't know. But I find that very interesting. And again, it made me wonder, is she back on the Jedi path? I have other questions. I want to move on from this if you're good.
Yeah. Yep. Keep rolling.
So first of all, Hera Syndulla, another great character from Rebels, is a general now. I'm still not convinced that I love this actress as Hera. Bree and I both talked about how we wish we could have gotten the voice, and I wish she looked more like her a little bit too. And they had dark eyeshadow on her; it just didn't feel right. But it's fine, you know. I'm happy just to see the character come to life.
Right.
But the next question I have is maybe nitpicky, but I think it's important, and maybe others have asked it too. How do they know that this map, hidden in an ancient temple, holds the location of Thrawn? You know what I mean? The impression I got is this I should say this map. They're calling it a key to the map, right? But like, why would it hold much more recent information? Thrawn's been gone for what, like 25, maybe 30 years.
Right.
But like, how
has it been that long?
How
even
would they know
since Ezra?
Okay, so
I mean, I feel like it's been like 10 years, maybe.
Yeah. So the events
I don't feel like it's even been that long.
Rebels. At the end of Rebels, Ezra, I think he calls out in the Force to the Purgle, who are space whales, and they come and they wrap themselves around the ship that Ezra and Thrawn
that they're on,
reach in and they grab onto Thrawn and everything, and they disappear into hyperspace and never to be seen again, theoretically, right?
Right.
So we don't know where they went. We don't know if they're in this galaxy or another. You know, like the Purgle are sort of mythical in a lot of ways. Like, you know, Hera didn't even think. Maybe she did know they existed. I don't know. But to her, they were just like a nuisance. Like, I don't know if anybody knows really what their range is, what they can do.
Right.
Anyway, so the question is, how does this map that I assume is much older... Oh, sorry, that took place right before, you know, the events of A New Hope. And this is like so. I don't know how long it is. I'm sorry, my timeline's a little bit unsure now that I say all that. Between A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, I don't know if that's 10 years or 15. And then this show is supposed to be taking place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, is my understanding. So maybe it's just 15, 20 years. I don't know. You could.
But see, I'm thinking Sabine Wren, I mean, jumping ahead here, doesn't seem like she's 15 or 20 years older than she was in Rebels. That's, I guess, where I'm getting hung up. Because they ended that like as young adults.
You're right.
Anyway.
Well, yeah.
But that could be just a continuity error of sorts that, yeah.
Well,
anyway.
The truth is, Dave Filoni's talked about how like not all these things are necessarily in chronological order. Like,
sure.
So that last scene in Rebels, which is Sabine, like sitting there in like with the painting, you know, the mural that she'd done of their old crew with Kanan and Ezra and everybody together. And then Ahsoka comes walking in. I think it's there. They might be in the tower, but like they recreated that scene at the end of this first episode or the second episode. Sorry, I'm ruining it again.
I think you're ruining it. Yeah, but that's okay.
But anyway, like I think the idea is some of this is taking place even before that last epilogue scene, right? So
yeah,
from Rebels.
Sure.
Anyway, let's move on.
Well,
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was actually one of my questions. I mean, we're jumping around a little bit, but I think we're at the point because, you know, they talk about the map. They talk about this, like, star map, whatever. And that it's to find Thrawn. And they're like, there's only one person who can help you decipher this or whatever. And obviously we meet Sabine. And, meet in Ahsoka, but are reintroduced to her.
Sure.
But one of my questions is, so you mentioned the epilogue, the end of Rebels and that scene and, you know, jumping ahead, whatever. But like, and that is supposed to be representative of the live action scene we see later. Is that what you're saying? I mean, we'll jump there, but just yes or no. Like, is that what you're thinking?
I saw a TikTok that suggested it. Right.
Okay.
There's sort of a remix of that scene. It might not be.
Okay.
It's possible that it's not supposed to be that exact thing, but it's certainly in that same spirit.
Sure. I guess what I'm questioning is and now maybe this is me not remembering Rebels very well, but was Sabine like Force sensitive ever? I mean, like we get this impression that she was a Jedi or an apprentice to Ahsoka in this first episode. This is what we're given the implication. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't remember there being ever an indication that she was. And then it's like, well, maybe that was the problem, that they tried to educate her and she was Mandalorian and whatever. And so it's like, maybe they thought she could be trained. And anyway, but I just want to make sure I wasn't wrong there.
It's really, this is probably the most controversial thing. They haven't addressed it exactly yet, but they're implying that she does have some Force sensitivity or something like that.
Right.
You know, I don't know, again, forgive me, I don't know how well you know Rebels, but the Darksaber came to Sabine at one point. They had stolen it from Maul's.
That's right. I forgot about that.
They had taken it from Maul's little work desk on Dathomir when he was, you know, trying to get something from the witches, right?
That's right.
The whatever ghosts of the witches or whatever. And so Kanan ends up with it and gives it to Sabine at a certain point and tries to train her with the Darksaber.
That's right. And, I did forget about that. Yeah.
So there are a couple of things that happen here that I think are of note. The first thing is Hera interjects with Kanan about like, are you sure you're not treating her differently because she doesn't have the Force? And to me, I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, of course.
Yeah.
Like my understanding all along is that the Force is the only thing that keeps Jedi and Sith from constantly cutting themselves to pieces. You know what I mean? It's like, these are incredibly dangerous weapons and like getting your hand too close to it would burn you, you know? So like, it seemed crazy to me to think about that, but the Mandalorians are also masters of weapons and that sort of thing. Like that's part of their whole deal, you know? So it doesn't seem impossible to me that they could use it in a more rudimentary capacity, you know, whatever.
Sure.
So him training her and everything, like, you know, it was a little choppy. And he even talks about how like, she's wound so tight and she's so proud and she's, you know, like so stubborn
Right.
with things and everything, and she's like, she's so Mandalorian. He's like, yes, exactly. Like, she's so Mandalorian. Anyway, so it's kind of
That's
funny,
funny.
right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, I don't know if they write it this way intentionally or if it just kind of happens. I find myself questioning if a lot of people are force sensitive,
Yeah.
even like Din Djarin, like a number of times.
Sure.
I talked about this in our Mandalorian series that we talked about. He has this sort of affinity a number of times with animals, right? And the very
Yeah, that's
like
true.
it's like the second or third episode, might even be the
Mm-hmm.
first episode, where he's talking to who we later find out his name is Queel,
Mm-hmm.
the Ugnaught, and he's like trying to ride the blurg, and he's like, like, our ancestors rode the great mythosaur, like,
Mm-hmm.
surely you can ride this,
Yeah.
and he does this little thing where he holds out his hand and he's calm and whatever, and I'm like, this is very
Mm-hmm.
force like,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's a good point.
there are things, I can't remember which games, I've played so many Star Wars games, but I was thinking that there were things like there was an animal, like maybe not quite control, but like an animal friendship sort of force power that you could get at certain points and that sort of thing. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not impossible to me that they could be force sensitive there.
Yeah.
So a lot of characters, like, they sort of wink a little bit and they say, who knows,
Sure.
maybe. So that someday if
Yeah.
we decide that, you can look back and be like, oh, look, the seeds
Oh,
of
we
that.
saw that. Yeah. Well, and I
So
think,
in some
I mean,
ways it's
like,
clever
the
writing,
prequels.
but
Yeah. And I think the prequels, whether we wanted it or not, gave us an avenue for thinking everyone could have some level of the force in them because midichlorians. And it's this idea that, like,
yeah,
well, some people have more midichlorians than others. And so it could be that everybody has some level of midichlorians, right? I mean, that's the impression we're
Yeah.
given. But some people have more, and then they are more force sensitive. So it's like, well, maybe there's this, it's not like a yes or no, it's more of a scale that, like, some people are going to have more power or more ability to harness it or whatever. But
yeah,
in that way, it's
Yeah,
like,
so
well,
this is-
probably everybody has a little bit of that or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. This is one of the areas where Star Wars is really vague, because you're right. I mean, like, even in A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi describes the Force as it's what gives a Jedi its power. It's an energy field that lives within all living beings. And like, Qui-Gon talks about it then later on in Episode 1, and he describes it, in that way. And midichlorians, they invented for, again, as a way to move the story forward. They talked about, and it's a thing that resides inside your blood, and it apparently measures your affinity for the Force, right? But according to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I assume, it's still canon, that like everyone has the Force in them in some way. Now, and maybe it's just a matter of controlling it or something, but I think they leave it intentionally vague.
Sure.
So yeah.
So ultimately, yes, Sabine was being trained. That caught me off guard a little bit, because I was like, oh, I didn't realize she was an actual apprentice.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not a part of the story that we've seen, but
Right.
that is
But
how,
it was never overtly as a Jedi. It was trained to use a Jedi weapon, right?
Sure.
And the whole
But being given the term apprentice isn't the idea.
Is very different. Yeah, this is very different. And
so you're saying in
it's
Rebels it was
complicated.
never, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was never. No one ever had any illusions that she was a Jedi in Rebels. So in this, they're implying that she was a Jedi apprentice of some kind. But what makes it even more complicated is that Ahsoka even has said that she's not a Jedi, right? So it's funny to me that she even would bring on an apprentice. You know what I mean? Because she doesn't exactly have like a banner to follow. You know what I mean? She's not a Jedi. She's not a Sith, obviously. You know what I mean? She's certainly working for the light side. But like, to me, it's the sort of like, why throw out the name Jedi because you walked away from an order that doesn't exist anymore? Just call yourself a Jedi now and recreate the order in a hopefully more perfect way.
Right.
But anyway, all that is to say, I assume some of those things will become clear later on in the series.
Sure.
They'll allude to some of those things.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a cool idea. I like Sabine's character, and when Ezra left, he snuck away at the end of Rebels. He sneaks away to go face Thrawn and ultimately disappear. And he leaves his lightsaber behind with Sabine. He leaves a message for her saying, "I'm counting on you," right? And we saw part of that message, recreated in live action, which I'm not convinced. I love the guy they have playing him. He looks
I know, I'm worried about it, but
somehow.
yeah,
We'll
hopefully
see.
it plays out better.
I don't even know that we'll for sure see Ezra in the show.
That's true.
I would be pretty disappointed if we don't, but that's part of what the show's going to be about. So I'm sure something will come up.
Right.
Anyway, so yes, she was a Jedi apprentice, it seems. But did we see her use any Force powers? I don't know if we did.
I don't think we did. Even when she was fighting, so at the very end of episode 1, when she's fighting the lady bad Jedi person, we don't have a name for her yet, right? We know we learned that is supposed to be Baylan's Skoll, right?
Yeah, Baylan,
we did learn her name.
Skoll. Maybe we did, maybe not.
It doesn't matter.
My notes.
I would say I don't remember learning her name. It just was. It was like it was his apprentice, sort of. I mean, like that was the implication. I think master and apprentice is what they said. Yeah. But even when she was fighting her, it was all just weaponry. Like I don't think we saw any indication of the Force.
I want to hit a couple things before we get to that.
Yeah.
I want to talk more about that, but can we just real quick get there? And I know, like I said, we're running pretty long here already. The next thing I have written down is there's a character named Ryder Azadi who I don't expect you to remember, but he was in Rebels, and he was the former governor of Lothal before the Empire came in and took over. And he escaped during a prison break, and he was really hesitant to join the rebellion because he didn't want to go back to prison and all that. Anyway, so he ends up joining the rebellion on Lothal, and they see him a number of times. And he's the white bearded guy that stood up and he calls for Sabine, and she never shows up.
Yeah.
So that's Ryder Azadi, and it was a great callback. It's apparently the actor who did the. I mean,
that's awesome. That's even better. Yeah.
Looks like him.
That makes it better.
I really love that.
That's awesome.
There was also, what's the kid's name? Jai Kell, who he was somebody he introduced him as a senator. He was one of the kids that Ezra helped escape the Empire when Ezra was undercover as like a
a trainee
student.
When he was like in the
yeah. So
that's so
that
cool.
was a cool tie-in too.
And
then so when Sabine doesn't show up and they try to take her, first of all, there are these new ships called E-Wings that everybody's very proud of. I find them sort of uninteresting. They look like a stunted X-Wing. I just think the X-Wing is cooler, and I don't know why they try to do this.
Yeah.
Moving on from that art direction idea, we find Sabine. She's not wearing her armor, and she always wore her armor, right? Mm-hmm. Like this was part of her identity, and very proud of her Mandalorian heritage, and like you see her struggle with her connection to family over time and everything. But like at the end, she was very close to her family and her clan and all that. Like it was all very important to her Mandalorian identity. So I was surprised that she's not wearing that. But now having heard that she was an apprentice to Ahsoka, it makes me wonder if some part of that, the Mandalorians and the Jedi were ancient enemies, but they came to be friends, Kanan and Ezra, with Sabine's family, and Fen Rao and a number of other Mandalorians we get to know throughout the series. Mm-hmm. And so I can't be surprised if they really fought her, but it seems that some part of her is not Mandalorian anymore either, which is like a huge deal, Right. And whether it's that she's just become so obsessed with the search for Ezra, who again has sort of haunted her with this message of like, I'm counting on you, like when the time comes or whatever. And she's like, at the end of Rebels, she's like, what does that mean? What are you counting on me for? And at the very end, it sounded like he's counting on me to come find him is the idea, So that's when Sabine and her wander off. But anyway, all that is to say, how sucky must life be? And again, I'm taking some leaps here. I'm making some assumptions that her family, like she's no longer connected to her family, right? And maybe she had to sever that connection somewhat to be apprenticed to Ahsoka, who then also, by her own words, walked away from her, sort of. You know what I mean? So it's like she doesn't belong to anything right now, you know?
Well,
And
talk
like,
about an identity crisis. I mean, she
yeah,
was kind of caught between these two worlds, and at least
yeah,
it seemed like Hera had kind of kept in touch, but
yeah, for sure.
even that was like, that's got to be. I mean, and I think we saw that kind of tortured soul, sort
Yeah,
of like this, like
yeah.
I don't know what
Well,
I stand for, I don't know what I live for. Like you said, just
yeah,
kind of haunted by Ezra and this
yeah,
possibility of what he expected from her, and even just pulling
absolutely.
out the message to. It's like clearly, I mean, she has it in a box, but it's like you get the impression that she's watched that
Yeah. How many
thousands of
times has he
times.
heard it? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was they've done that very well, this sort of lost soul thing, but knowing the history a little more, I feel like tells us something. I hope that they dig into that a little bit. I want to know,
Yeah.
what happened with her and everything. I don't know. I'm fascinated by that. I think it'll be cool if we see some force sensitivity develop. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, I don't think that there's any rule that, like, when Luke came to Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back, he's like, I'm ready, and he's like, he's too old, and there are all these other things, all these complaints and everything. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
clearly to be a Jedi, it seems like you have to have force sensitivity, right?
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily have to develop like that when you're a child. It doesn't have to grow over time necessarily. Like, I don't know. Maybe the force will come to her little by little as she does this mission. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I wanted to say also the concept of family is really focused on in Rebels too, and it's one of the themes that, like, I don't know, it seems kind of obvious at times, but like every so often it hits that, like, you know uh, Ezra's parents were killed, as part of the rebellion, the early rebellion.
Yeah.
um, you know Hera's family is part of the resistance on their planet, and they've lost countless friends and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Zeb's people were hunted to near extinction. And, like,
Yeah.
all of these people are people who have lost a great deal of people.
Yeah.
Um,
Which, by the way, was in my story that I
Kanan's
created.
was it
Well, just the
really?
idea that everyone like loses people and then they have to come
Yeah,
together because they're all
yeah,
trying to live separately. And anyway, but
yeah. The
whatever, it's
unity.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, they did it all right, but I'm sure
Anyway,
you would have done
yeah,
it better.
so much better.
Um,
Yeah.
but
But
yeah,
yeah,
like
I mean
Kanan
that
had
that
lost his master.
community,
All
that
he'd been
family.
betrayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really. I think it was really well done there. But, like, so that is maybe. I mean, if you look at that family of hers now, Ezra's gone, Kanan's dead. I don't know where Zeb is, but like, Hera and Chopper are still out there. Well, we saw Zeb. Yes, we
We
saw
saw
Zeb
Zeb.
in The Mandalorian season 3,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's what
it
I was
was
like. I
cool.
remember seeing him. That was really cool, which I think is
It
a
was.
clear indicator we'll see him again. But
I hope so. It was so good. Like, I wanted to giggle. I thought it was so good when
that made
that
me
was
so happy.
maybe my favorite. I have to think really hard about it, but one of my favorite cameos in all of this
Mm-hmm.
was seeing Zeb for a few moments, and it was his
Right.
voice, and they managed to CGI it really well. It looked just
Yeah.
like him, and he fit
It
in the
did.
world. I was like, oh my gosh, please give
It
this
was
man a show. I would
fantastic.
love it.
Yeah.
But he was also, like, he was maybe one of the Rangers. You know what I mean? One of
Yeah.
the Rangers of the New Republic, which is a
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
cool series that never happened. Now, I'd love it
Yeah.
if they got back to that someday.
Yeah. Well, and I think something
Anyway,
that's
so all that
interesting
is to
is
say,
they drew attention to the mural, like on several
yeah,
instances, that it was like this reminder. And I think that, again, talking about um, Sabine's kind of disconnect and lost, like you said,
yeah,
lost soul, tortured soul, this
yeah,
stuck in a lack of identity or whatever. But they kept kind of going back to this mural, this picture of what it was all about, kind of. And like you said, the unity, the family that they had in this team.
yeah.
And anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know that it was more just, I thought, just to kind of illustrate the well, the importance of, like you said, unity, but also just like how, like who this group was. For anyone who hasn't
Yeah.
seen Rebels, there's this misunderstanding of, or just lack of understanding of, who any of these characters are. And I think I would
Right.
say maybe Ahsoka, I would say almost more than any of the other Disney, Star Wars, Disney shows, like the newer, Obi-Wan and Mandalorian and Boba Fett. I say Ahsoka, and you can disagree with me here, but maybe one of the ones that is the least easy to jump into without knowing anything. Like Mandalorian, kind of a standalone. Like, yeah, you see some characters, you get to know some people, but it's its own story. Boba Fett even ends up being that way, and it kind of tells what happened with him, and maybe we'll learn more in Ahsoka, but I feel like it just, you come into it and there's all these characters that clearly have significant backstories, and if you haven't seen Rebels or Clone Wars or anything, you'd be completely lost. And I think
you're absolutely right.
That's something that is slightly new, because I had a friend who is interested in Ahsoka a little bit, and they're like, do I need to have seen like other like Star Wars stuff? And I'm like, yeah, like 100%.
Yeah.
Probably you need to see the entire Rebels show basically to get a good feel for, the main characters. So anyway, I mean, Ahsoka is the main character, but they're building the story around, anyway. Yeah.
No, they've for sure. Everybody sort of said this is sort of unofficially like another season of Rebels, right? So it does feel like you got to watch all of Rebels really to get this. Which hopefully everybody who is watching this, all the thousands and tens of thousands that are watching our channel right now,
sure.
Hopefully they all have an understanding of it enough. But
well, if the fans out there want, we can do an episode of Pew Pew Time that is focus on Rebels. We'll do like a synopsis. So let the fans decide. They can let us know if we.
Man, Colin and I had like a notebook full of stuff that I wanted to talk about. So we just never got around to it. All right. So the next thing, we saw Ryder, we saw Sabine, and again, a little insight on her like her situation and her angst and everything. It's like I felt a little frustrated for a moment because she seems she's not confident. And if there was anything that Sabine always was, it was confident. Like she was, again, that's part of being a Mandalorian, is this pride and this, whatever. But she's going through some stuff, and so it's kind of cool, like all of that stuff. I remember being like, why is she acting like sort of, like an angsty, lazy teenager here? But like she's going through some stuff. Yeah. So she steals the thing from Ahsoka, which was, of course, apparently perfectly in character for her these days. Yeah. Runs away, and we get our little look at her space, and then the robots, whatever. I guess the two Dark Jedi, they see her cruising along. He sends his apprentice to go with the droids, and they go and they attack her in her space, and she has just unlocked it. Right? It's like, again, she's sitting there going like, oh well, maybe I can't, whatever, and then just sort of does it, and
which I have to say, unlocked. Just as a side note here about the unlocking. I mean, I know we're getting long here, but one of the things that I thought was funny or interesting was that they're like, we can't decipher it. This ancient droid can't figure it out. We need Sabine. Now, again, storyline, I get it. They're building a need for Sabine into the storyline, but I'm like, all she did was stare at this like digital map and then recognize it was the markings on the floor, basically, of the map. And it was like, oh, you just line those up that way. And I was like, this like ancient, brilliant droid couldn't figure that, but it doesn't matter. Storyline, I get it, but it was still kind of funny to me.
I don't know. Yeah, I agree. You have a point there. His understanding is lore and that sort of thing. He might not be all about analysis of other ancient things, whatever. And we found out later,
and it doesn't matter.
A Jedi temple, but I know. I get what you're saying. I did feel like that was a little silly. So they break in, they steal it, they tear up her place. She runs after him, grabs her lightsaber. Again, very interesting. She grabs her lightsaber, not her Mandalorian armor. Right. I found that very interesting. And she runs out and she tries to face him. She at least gets one of the droids, and then faces off with the apprentice girl, whose name escapes me, and she does okay, but like you can tell, it's like she doesn't know what she's doing, kind of still. You know what I mean? Like you can tell this is not a Jedi Master. It's not a Jedi Knight. This This is a kid learning to use their
Right.
lightsaber still. And she gets stabbed.
Pretty aggressively. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, like right through
So.
her like side, kind of like.
Yeah.
You got her appendix there or something.
I mean, I felt like it was a pretty pretty high shot. I mean, yeah, it threatens.
Certainly.
I mean, the assumption is that she's going to be okay. I mean, that's what I assumed immediately, because it was like, well, this is the beginning. It feels like Sabine's going to be a pretty big player in this. But I was like, wow, she just got stabbed all the way through with a lightsaber. Like, that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
But
well, she called out really quick to Hu Yang. He had shipped communicator to him, whatever. So they came racing to her rescue, and she's of course been run through. To be honest, I'm a little troubled, a little bothered from time to time at how they've sort of cheapened lightsabers to make it like not always fatal. I mean, because like that would be pretty fatal, and often, not always it was in the old ones.
Yeah.
But that said, they have back to tanks. They have all this different like technology to help somebody heal. So it's not impossible. It just feels like they've made lightsabers much less powerful over time. They've nerfed it in order to continue the storyline. But I loved. I'll skip a couple of notes because we're running here. But next we find that Arcana was. I think they said Arcana. Arcana was the white planet where Ahsoka found the map.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Excuse me. And we find out that Morgan is her ancestors were the Night Sisters. Are you familiar with the Night Sisters?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So they're sort of force wielding non-Sith, non-Jedi, but extremely evil. Witches.
Well, they're considered witches, right? Yeah, I was going to say they mentioned witches. The Night Sisters are witches. It's so probably a different form of using the Force. Yeah, right.
But it's all it's canon enough now because of the Clone Wars, and
that's what I was going to say. It's a pretty heavy component in Clone Wars, isn't it? I mean, the Night Sisters and the what are their male components? I can't remember counterparts.
It's Dathomir, so it's the Night Sisters and. I don't know if they call them the Night Brothers. I don't remember, but it's Darth Maul is of that race. So, there's this like ancient, like they're the same species,
right?
Anyway,
but so we find out that that's her background, or that's her
like her ancestry, right?
Right.
And Dave loves the Night Sisters. One of the things that they've talked about is. He loved writing anything that had like less to do with the original trilogy, and I was like, "Yeah, I get that," because you kind of get to make up your own stuff, and I think that's kind of what this is. This is like, it doesn't feel very Star Warsy to me. The Night Sisters never have, but it's been in enough Star Wars now that I can't really fight it. So it is what it is. But that says that she's more than we originally thought she was when we saw her in season 2 of Mandalorian. And it sort of lends a little more credibility to her fight against Ahsoka. You know what I mean? It felt a little too hard for Ahsoka to just like knock her down, which it seems like she should have right away.
It seemed bizarre how powerful she seemed to be, or how weak Ahsoka might have been. It was like it did feel like it didn't make sense. So now it definitely makes that more valid.
It helped. So that temple, that whole temple, all the white, everything was built by the Night Sisters, which again leads me to think, why do the Night Sisters have this map that somehow details where Grand Admiral Thrawn is? Maybe they'll get into it. Maybe this is just like a shut up and don't worry about it sort of moment. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it is so bizarre because it feels like,
it feels to me like there have to be countless galaxies out there, even in this universe, right? So why do they know that this galaxy that's in this map is the one that they're looking for?
Right.
Is this just like they know that they tracked the Purrgil? Is that what it was? I don't know. Maybe there's a detail there that I missed, but it confused me.
Well, maybe it has something more to do with like almost a magical kind of connection, that it's like it shows you kind of like what you're seeking. I mean, it doesn't say that, but it's like maybe the map
Maybe
shows some level of
it's like Jack Sparrow's compass.
right,
It shows you what your heart desires, something like that. Honestly,
something like that.
I'm making a joke, but it could be something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but they both are saying it's directing them to Thrawn, so it's like, well,
yeah,
that makes it seem like that's an exact point that it's trying to make.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like, and maybe this is in episode 2, but more than once they mentioned him being in exile, and I'm like,
yeah. I mean, like, not a traditional exile, but he's just far away and he has no way of getting back. You know what I mean?
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
But it does.
I think of exile is like,
yeah, like he's been cast out or something,
right? Like it was a choice made by a group of people, and they sent him away. You know, at least that's
I think it was pretty much. It was Ezra and the Space Whales, which, by the way, would make a great band name. Somebody do that.
No, trademarking it. If anyone uses it, you owe us.
Okay, we're gonna make a band.
Okay.
A jizz
Perfect.
band.
Perfect.
So anyway, there is a moment where Sabine has like a dream, and it's like when she's like, I think repairing or whatever. She's in the hospital.
Yeah.
I think, right? That's still in this episode, and she, I think it might be a Force dream. So, like, that might be, like, she's got some force, like, something that's just undeveloped, you know what I mean? But she, like, hears Ezra's voice, and she's hearing some of the things that have already happened and whatever, and she, like, sort of leaps up, wakes up.
Right. Well, she has a dream about him before, like, in her own little home. She has a dream that is, like, we don't see it, but we experience it with her. Like, we hear what she's dreaming, and she sits up in her bed.
That's what I'm talking about. Wasn't that after?
Oh,
wasn't that after, or was that before?
That was before she met up with Ahsoka. And then when she was healing, which is episode 2, she it happened again. She reflected on the same stuff.
I have it written down here as the end of episode 1, but
the end of episode 1 is her collapsing on the ground.
For the next episode.
Yeah, it's all right. Do better, Nate.
Yeah.
The end of episode 1 with Sabine is her just stabbed through. Like, that's how she ends episode 1. We don't see any recovery. It drops to credits immediately. And then we see her in recovery in episode 2.
Okay.
We're left to assume she might have died at the end of episode 1. Or to think she could have.
For all we know, because we have allegedly not watched episode 2.
Well, I thought we were already talking about episode 2, because we are definitely talking about episode 2 material.
All right. Well, let's just hear... I'm telling you, I have notes. Episode 2 starts on my next page. This is still on the other page. There's a moment. There's a moment where they find out the identity, at least, of the master of the 2 Dark Jedi. Right?
Yeah.
When it's Hu Yang is identifying the lightsabers, and I thought this was super fun. Again,
yeah,
the lightsabers, the lore. He remembers everyone who he ever helped to make a lightsaber for, and he's like, "Oh, that's this guy." When he does the analysis. And that was cool. It was just sort of fun. He's like, yeah, it's very elegant. I like the design. Whatever it's like, it's just sort of fun. I thought those were fun touches.
Yeah.
But they find out his name is Baylan Skoll. Skoll,
I think.
And I found that very interesting. And yeah, honestly, I'm really excited to see where that goes. And there were some more on the 2 of them in episode 2 that I can't wait to dig into.
Well, and honestly, so I'm curious. No, so Baylan Skoll, this is another just question mark. He's a new character, correct? To the universe.
As far as I know, he's never been anything. And I want to make a comment here that something I learned today. The actor who played Baylan Skoll, who I should look
passed away
really quick. Yeah,
May of this year.
May. Yeah, I had no idea.
He was
really
50. He was 58. He was not that old. It's very sad. Yeah. I saw that because the end of episode 1 says in honor of Ray or something like that.
Yeah. I didn't make the connection.
So I immediately looked it up. Yeah. So he made it through the whole show. But that's very sad because I do think he seems like, well, and what's funny is that I was looking and I'm like, yeah, he's been in a lot. Seems like a cool actor. It's sad, but yeah.
Yeah.
We won't be able to see him in anything else anymore.
I liked old white bearded Jedi and stuff. The old space wizard thing. Yeah. I love that. I was really excited. And the truth is, Well, we'll talk about it more in the next episode.
I'll say there's a moment
I
at the
found
end
it
of
really
episode 2
interesting.
that I want to mention that he's
Yeah.
a part of that I really appreciated and thought was kind of neat. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
anyway, like,
but yeah,
I'd
so episode
love
1
to-
wraps up as a cliffhanger for sure.
Yeah. I'd love to talk more about our hopes and dreams for the series, but I think we should do that in episode 2 because we've run so long.
That's
here
fine.
now, but
Let's jump onto the next.
So,
yeah.
Vague.
And we've already talked about episode
aside.
2 a little bit here, but yeah.
So
You'll be able to cut some of that
sorry,
then.
they came out together. We thought about making one episode, but it just felt like that was going to be even longer, and I like keeping them separate.
It would have been. Yeah.
Anyway, for Pew Pew time, I'm Nate.
I'm
That's
Rach.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
That's what it's like to live in Hollywood.
Man, I'm good at this.